So we're learning sacred letters, 302, chapter 31. We're on page Kuf Nun Beis. Just to recap this page, the Balatanya here kind of culminates all of the sacred letters with the important message of unity between Jews. And this was necessary, is necessary at all times, as we very well know. But he explains it using a Kabbalistic idea, and then he gives us a very physical example from medicine, from our biology, and then he brings it back home to the concept of connection between people. And when there's connection between people, between Jews, where they really bond with each other, then God likes that, right? God, as we say, Avraham Esim Shalom every day, Barucheinu Avinu Kolanu Ka'echad, blesses God when we're all together. Us being all together brings down the bracha. So, but he begins with, he's saying, know the Basharim. It's known in the gates of the scholars and the rabbis who gather to talk about Torah and about God and about spirituality, that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is sick in Golus. Now, when you say Avram's sick, that means there's an ailment, there's an illness. What is the illness? This is what he describes here. The illness is that the Shekhinah, Menashe, is in Golus. And he says, just as it's necessary for there to be proper blood flow from the heart to the limbs, and from the limbs to the rest of the body, the limbs and the sinews to the rest of the body, and if there isn't proper oxygenation of the blood, then one becomes ill. And he gives these details in a very elaborate mushal parable. And the point being, what's the moral? What's the nimshal? What does he want? To teach us how important it is to have the heart flow, the blood flow from the heart properly to the limbs. So, in order for there to be a result coming from that blood flow in the limbs, the first thing is that the heart has to give it. Who is the heart in the moral? The heart in the moral is, as we'll learn soon, is the Shekhinah. And this Shekhinah, if we relate to the Shekhinah, to the divine presence properly, then the Shekhinah gives the blood flow, the energy to the world we live in, to the limbs. We are the limbs, Moshe. So we have, the Shekhinah is compared to the heart, to the lev. Moshe, I would love for you one day, and maybe you did this already, to make a piece of art based on this parak here in Lamed Aleph. The heart, the limbs, and the result of that. There's the Shekhinah, which is analogous to the heart. The Jewish neshamas, we are analogous to the limbs. And then the result being we're either in Golus or not in Golus. What does it mean? If there's a breakdown in the limbs, in the Jewish souls being together, Achdus, if there's lacking Achdus and unity, there's a problem with the blood flow and the oxygenation of the blood flow, and we become ill, i.e., we have Golus. So when will we have the Messianic, the Mashiach experience? When the Shekhinah, the heart, does its job. And it does its job because the limbs are receptacles for the blood flow coming from the heart. So this is what he says in this chapter. This is why it's such an important kind of, it's not the actual last one, the next one, Lamed Beis, which we're going to learn tomorrow on Thursday, Mitzvah Shem, is the actual end of Igeres HaKodesh. But this one is close enough. So I was saying, Moshe, what is he kind of ending the fourth section of Tanya with? Achdus, unity. Because without Achdus, it's nothing. You can be a great scholar in a Talmud Chacham, and you're in your own corner. Big deal. The whole accomplishment of Torah and the whole purpose and drive is to be together. Yes, there are differences, different minhagim, customs, different styles, but we're all kulona ke'echad. So let's learn now on page Kuf Nun Beis, where we're at, which is 4 lines from the bottom. In middle of the page, Asher al Kain, okay? Asher al Kain, al pi hadvarim ho'em v'ho'em esa'ela, based on these words. And this truth, the Alter Rebbe, Avram, when the Alter Rebbe says about his words that they're words of truth, you have to understand who the Alter Rebbe was for him to say about his own words the truth. The Alter Rebbe was the furthest things from a Baal Gaiva, from an ego-driven individual. Nevertheless, he calls these words the words of truth. And I'll explain that based on what the Rebbe once said on the Rambam in his introduction to the Yad Chazaka, to his magnum opus. The Rambam says there, from Moshe ad Moshe, like come, no, the Rambam, the son of the Rambam. Yeah, he says from Moshe Rabbeinu till Moshe ben Maimonides, no one has stood up like such a Moshe. That's pretty arrogant. And the Rebbe asked once this question: how could the Rambam write this in his own introduction? And the Rebbe answered that he was obligated to write it to teach us how important this book is. In other words, Hashem says to Rambam, I know Rambam, you're a very modest guy. I know you would never put your name and put your writing and all that, but you have to do it for me. Because I need Klal Yisrael to learn Rambam, to learn the entire Torah. And I say the same thing what the Alter Rebbe is saying here about his own words. For the Alter Rebbe to call his own writing words of truth is not arrogance, it's the epitome of humility. And I've said this many times, and I say it again, whether it's Avram, a musician, or Moshe, an artist, or each and every one of us with whatever we do, if we don't recognize our talents and we poo-poo them and we dismiss them, it's self-degradation. And the Chafetz Chaim, who wasn't a chassid, the holy tzaddik, the Chafetz Chaim, says that's a form of lashon hara. And Chassidus would say it's the worst type of gaiva, the worst type of ego. Right? Your shul asks you to play for the event, and you say, no, I don't know how to play. You're a liar. You're such a Baal Gaiva. You're known all over. You go all over. People recognize your great talent in writing and art, in drawing and playing and this and that. And when it comes to the shul, all of a sudden you don't know how to play the piano. That's Gaiva. The Alter Rebbe knows what he put into this chapter because he's quoting the Igeres HaKodesh, he's quoting Torah. So he has an obligation to tell us, hey fellas, hey people learning this is Torah, this is truth. It's not his Torah. He didn't make up he put things together. Remember, what does the Alter Rebbe call himself? A compiler, right? Likuti Amarim. The Alter Rebbe, out of his great modesty, gave the name of his Sefer HaTanya, the name that he chooses on the cover page, by the way. It doesn't say the word Tanya. You know that, Chevra? Everyone calls it Tanya. Do you study Tanya? I went to Tanya. It doesn't say the word Tanya on the title page. It's only because chapter 1 begins with the Brisa. Tanya, B'Seif Perek Gimel Nida, so it's become known as the book of Tanya, Sefer HaTanya. But the name that the Baal Tanya chooses on the title page is L'Kuti Amorim, a collection of sayings, of teachings. All I am is a compiler. That's all I'm doing. So that's real humility. So how does that jive with what he says over here? That what I said before in this chapter 31, the sacred letters, is emes, because that's what emes is. Emes is not bluff. Real modesty is truth. And the truth is, and I saw this by the Rebbe, and I saw this by Rabbi Yoel Khan, I saw it by people who really were, people who were devotees of Hashem, really Ovdei Hashem. It's not as though they didn't, when you needed to step up to the plate, you step up to the plate. Okay? Someone comes to a simcha, who's a Rav, who's a Mashpia, who's a Gadol, who's a person, communal person, and he's asked to come to sit on the dais. He says, no, I want to sit in the back, right? And I understand that. But there are times when, by you sitting up front, it honors the Baal Simcha. It gives chashivut, importance to the event. I told you, Rabbi Reichik, I was showing from Los Angeles, Rabbi Shmuel David Reichik, he was like a Beinani of Tanya, right? He would always sit up front, up front. And they asked him, Rabbi Reichik, you're such a humble person, why kind of do you... He says, the Frierdiker Rebbe told me to sit up front. I sat in the back, and he said, you are my shliach, and you sitting up front, it's not you, it's me. And he's a Lubavitcher Rebbe. So therefore, I want you to sit up front. So when we learn these words, they're like, it's like inserted here and people skip over it. But I myself, in teaching it to you, I'm thinking about this idea. How does the Alter Rebbe say about his own words, the words of truth? And that's the answer. Let's continue. The Alter Rebbe says, it's difficult to explain well, Moshe, this concept in a letter. There's certain things, WhatsApp, Schmatzap, texting, faxing, phone calls, it's difficult to communicate. I think the virtue of this share that we have, that we can see each other in this classroom, is gewaldig, because it's the closest thing to being there live with you and you with I, right? The Alter Rebbe says it's difficult to communicate what the illness to the Shechina is, and the reparation of that is through Achdus, without seeing each other face to face. Because when you don't see each other face to face, or you don't, right, it's hard to reconcile. It's so easy to do it over the screen and over a message, but it's not real. The real is when you see each other face to face, and one person slighted another person, and one person said something, and you're jealous about this, or you have a complaint about this. When you see each other face to face, you can hug each other, you can cry with each other, you can laugh with each other, you can say you're a jerk. You understand? It's real. So that's what the Alter Rebbe says here. One second, Moshe. It is difficult to explain very well. Moshe, let me just finish the thought, and then I'll take your question or your comment. It is difficult to explain well the michtov in a letter, this idea. Nevertheless, nikreis hashchina b'shem lev. To explain in a letter the meaning that the Shechina is referred to as the heart. V'haneshamos, and the Jewish souls are referred to b'shem evorim, limbs. Lohoiris lanu, to teach us, ki kasher kol haneshamas dvukis kodesh yachav. This teaches us when all the Jewish neshamas are bound and connected together. Azai, then, top of page 304. Sivuv v'hilu chachayis, the circulation and the flow of energy. V'hashpo, and the shefa, and the effluence. Seiviv, it surrounds. V'noah seifim b'tchiloson, and the edge is wedged in the beginning. L'kasher u'lechaber, to bind and to connect. Kulan, all, LaHashem echad, to the one God, L'dovke bo yisborach, to cleave to him, Kumeshikosuv, and as it says, Atem hatveikim, Atem nitzavim hayoim kulchem, you here, you stand before me all together. The hippies and the yippies and the pippies are all together with the Meisharimniks and the Litvaks and the Svardische and the Chabadniks and the Breslovers. Everyone's out together. Roshechem Chuli, your heads, your water fetchers. I'm looking at Yaini and I remind myself the way it's in a Karl Bachshul. That's the way I felt going there. All kinds of Friday nights when I would go, I would look around. I mean, that great Bucky in Tanakh that I told you from the Sephardic Shul. I see him with his kid in the Karl Bach Shul Friday night, and I say, "What are you doing here? Like you belong to the shul next door." He says, "I want my kid here to enjoy Yiddishkeit, and the simcha over here is great." And then you have people with ponytails, and people from Mir, and people from Chaim Berlin, and people from here, and Chabadniks, and Hasidim, and Streimel. The Kulchem, the Roshechem, everyone together, that Achdus is the most powerful. This will also explain the teaching of the sages. Listen to this, Chevre. The destruction of the second temple, and us falling into Golus, into exile, and the removal of the divine presence, and its descent to the nation of Edom, which some say is Rome, etc., to our enemies. Golus kaviyachol, anthropomorphically speaking, in what we call Golus, exile. The Shechina is a slave. The Shechina is a slave. Hakol hoya ba'oven sinas chinam. Here it is. It's all because of baseless hatred amongst Jews. Upirut levavas rachman litzlan, and separation of hearts and opposing hearts. Pirut isn't just difference of opinion. Pirut means I'm against you. Rahman litzlan. That causes the Golus HaShechina. V'lochei nikras choyle, therefore it's called choyle, illness. Al derech moshel, for example, k'mish kosuf, soymech noiflim, Hashem supports those that fall, v'roifei choylem, and He heals those that are ill. Loshin rabim, hein. He doesn't say soymech noifeil, singular. Right? Menashe doesn't say roifei choyli. He says choylim, soymech noiflim. Why the plural? Loshin rabim. Him kol evarim, because it's talking about all the limbs, all the souls. It's not just God supports one fallen soul. All the souls that are involved in fighting, arguments, divisiveness are analogous to the different limbs in our body. We need to bring them all together. And when we bring them all together, then the blood flow can work. So it's interesting what the Alter Rebbe says here, that the Alter Rebbe is saying that it's not enough for Hashem, who's the heart. You have a good, strong heart, right? I'll give you an example. Just my mother-in-law was showing her yard sites in a week and a half in Mirz Hashem, right? I asked the doctor, Dr. Demiris, he was also passed on. He was a guy, but he was like a tzaddik. He was tremendous. So I asked him, are my mother's vitals, organs, what's the story? He says, they're great. She has a strong heart. She has this. There's only one problem. She has scoliosis, she has kyphosis, which is like a question mark of the spine, where it crushes the chest cavity, you can't breathe, you die. Strong heart, strong mind, everything's all right. And, I always thought, she was overweight, and because of that, diabetes. No Baruch Hashem, no diabetes, no this, that. She was born this way. That's the way she was born. And what's the point I'm getting at? That you can have a strong heart, but if the limbs are messed up, you're going to have problems. So that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. The Shechina is the lev. The heart. The Shechina, Yoni, is in great shape. The problem is, for the Shechina, for the Lev, for the blood to come to the Evarim need to be good Evarim, good limbs. Oh, that's our job. We are the Evarim. And when we fight and when we're divisive and we say he's not good and she's not good and I'm better and I know and this minig and that minig, can't imagine here, right? Many of the Hasidim don't say Tachnun from the 23rd. I don't know how it's in your shul, Moshe, your shul, Yoni. But, a lot of the Hasidim here don't say from Chav Gimel Adar till Rosh Chodesh Nisan because it's called the Shivas Yemei HaMiluyim. When the Mishkan was erected, they had 7 days of preparing. So that's a reason not to say Tachnun. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't say that, okay? Chabad says Tachnun and many others do. But anyway, we have one in our shul, the famous Shlomo Shabbos shul I've been telling you about for 7-8 years. Moshe Metzger, God bless him, is the main gabbai, and he is a stickler for saying Tachnun. And he says, if Shulchan Aruch says you don't say. Otherwise, you're going to say Tachnun in the shul. And, you have to understand, there are thousands of people going to that shul, and most of them don't say Tachnun because they're Hasidim by Mincha and these 7 days. And he says, well, here you're going to say. So one guy was a great guy in our minyan, our Nate's minyan. Sunday was the first, I think, Chav Gimel. He runs out of shul. So I tell him the next day, why are you running out of shul? He says, because I don't want to say Tachnun. I say, don't say Tachnun. What do you have to make? Could you imagine such an issue? I'm not going to say silly and small because by them it's great, but it's like, is this worth storming out? Is this worth making a fight about? Don't say Tachnun. Do whatever you want, but keep the peace. And it's I'm preaching to the choir because I believe you all agree and feel the same way. But this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. This is why we have illness. You want to know why we have illness? You know why we have October 7th? It's because we're not together. We have to be together. We have to have Achdus. Moshe, now it's your turn.
Well, actually, now I have 2 questions. Really quick. One question is that just a question on the expression or the words the Alter Rebbe uses, the Yeridasa le'Edom, the descent to Edom, the Shin. What does that mean exactly? I feel like I've heard that many times.
Well, without specifying exactly, do we know who Edom is today? They say Edom is Rome. Edom comes from Esav. It basically means the nation that seeks to destroy the Jewish people. So,
that I understand. Edom. I meant the descent.
The descent, because the Shechina pre-Golus, in let's say the time of Shlomo HaMelech, right? When Chazal say it's Kaima Sira Bashmus, it was like a full moon. And other expressions, Ish Tachas Gafne V'Tachas Teinose. You've heard this. Every man with his own garden and his own vineyard, flourishing, is beautiful. Let's for a second say pre-October 7th. I'm just right. It's great, beautiful. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Then comes this disaster that's thrown the entire country into a golus, into a slavery. We can't walk out. Corona, the same way. So in other words, whenever there is a change that appears to be negative, right, from our perspective, it's a yerida of the Shechina. The Shechina that was in full control. The Shechina that was flourishing. All of a sudden, everything is topsy-turvy. Now it is a yerida. It is a descent. It cannot express itself in the same positive way from our perspective as it was before. Is that clear? Clearer, Moshe?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
The next point. You have 2 points.
Yeah, just the second point was just the issue when you were talking about the Alter Rebbe, you were speaking about the issue of a person who's like a musician, for example, like Avram,
Yeah.
a musician, also an artist, just as an example.
Yeah.
I always find it's always very challenging. It's much easier. Sometimes I find it's so much easier to try to promote somebody else's talents than your own talents, because you feel very self-conscious, about putting yourself out there, etc. And I'm just making it.
Right. And I could relate to that very, very well, and have experienced that many, many times. And the way to do it, the way I see it and found it to be well received, is you make people aware, and that's it. When you start nudging and when you start pushing, and that's where it becomes problematic. One of the things I do is I do oral history biography, and it's not a cheap thing, because it takes hours and hours of interview, and it's not for most people, because it's quite a bit of money, right? I know, so I identify different families that I know can afford it. You understand? So I let them know, and I make my case that it's not about me, being paid. Of course, I got to be paid for what I do. That's my parnasa. But that's not it. It's about your grandfather or your father, who this information is valuable for the future generations of your family. And if you don't record it, it's going into the earth. And you're not going to have it. Because everyone knows a little bit this, a little bit that. And I'm telling you, I could give hours of conversation about this point, because I've had these conversations and I see it. Like this 90-year-old man in Chicago, right? Here's a man who God has blessed him with a tremendous amount of wealth. The money here is pittance, like for us, pennies, right? And he don't want to do it. So I sit down with his son and I say, my dear son, your father's 90. God bless him. He's going around. He's springing around. He's like the Gabbai Yeshua. He gives out the aliyahs. He's in charge, right? That's great. That's now. Do we know the future? No. He has a story. So he says, yeah, I know a lot of the stories. I say, okay, has it been recorded? And then I say to him, I bet you don't know a lot of the stories. If I were to sit down with you and challenge you and throw out questions, you're going to go, I don't know, maybe, when? And yet, it hasn't happened. What's my point? My point is, that's it. I made the presentation. I'm not going to go chase them. I'm not going to go, beg them, So that's my answer to you, or my comment to you, Moshe. You are obligated to share your talents, what you have. And if you have a gewaldige piece that would be so well for this particular family, this particular person to hang on, yeah, you should let them know. You should let them know it. So it's not just coming from a business, money perspective to make parnasa. It's the inyan is emes. That's what you have to look at. Is the inyan emes? If the inyan is emes and it's valuable for that particular person or family, you have an obligation to tell them. That's my point, Moshe. And by not telling them, you're not being modest. You're being, sorry to say, a fool. Or it's not modesty. Modesty means that although God has blessed me with a certain talent, music, writing, art, whatever the case, whatever we do in our lives, but if Hashem would have given it to someone else, they would do a better job. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu said. That's modesty. But, and that's why I shared with you the few stories during the Shir, Rabbi Reichik and others. Rabbi Reichik was the furthest thing away from any sense of ego. Rabbi Yoel Khan. I mean, these are people who are, Avdei Hashem. But yet, Rabbi Yoel would get up and speak from the podium about what he believed was the Rebbe's message. And the proof is that when the Rebbe had his heart attack in 1977, Shmini Atzeres, the Rebbe told Rabbi Groner to have Rabbi Yoel communicate a certain message that he told Rabbi Groner and to explain it. So the Rebbe knew not Rabbi Groner could do it, and not only Rabbi Yoel Kahn can take this concept and explain it with a syringe and medicine, because the Rebbe had injections for his heart during the heart attack and all of that. So the Rebbe took a lesson from the injection. And he said to Rabbi Groner, have Rabbi Yoel Kahn explain it to the whole crowd. I was there. 5,000 people in the room were all shattered and thankful that the Rebbe, that he had his heart attack, but that he was saved, because he could have died easily. And yet, what's the message? And the Rebbe shared a message, right? So Rabbi Yoel, imagine, would say, no, I'm not going to get up. And, I'm not a... It was in 770. It was like Anna Farbrengen. There are pictures of it, because it was after Yom Tiv, Simchas Torah. Talking about Nachman, Simchas Torah. And I have pictures of it, and it's amazing to see. I flash back, to 1977, and I was there. And I heard it, right? And what's the point? He could say, no. So he positions himself by the place where the Rebbe says, where the Rebbe would speak. He could say, I should even stand over here. It's such a big embarrassment for me to stand in the same place as the Rebbe. No, this is the call of the hour. This is the call of the hour. So I think it's very important to know this, and I'm very glad that you brought it up, because it is something that I relate to. And what you said, it's like you're pushing your own self, and you feel like it's not nice, Yeah, so there's certain ways of being too pushy, and that's not nice. But then there's the other extreme, not letting people know, and then what you're offering for their benefit is just as not nice. And it's a balance. That's why Hashem gave us a cup, a mashpia, a rav, a good friend, a spouse, to know as much as we can, and we do make mistakes, but that's fine. We're not perfect. Chevra, we'll learn tomorrow, Mit Hashem. Good conversation. Zay Gazon. Thank you, Moshe, for bringing up these issues.
Thank you.
Zay Gazon. Take care. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you,